It's time for our January Patreon bonus video. This month, I'm excited to take a request and we'll be painting some watercolor birds. Hey friends, thank you for being here and welcome to the first Patreon exclusive tutorial of 2022. We've had a request for winter birds and I'm excited to do just that. This year, I'm challenging myself not just to work on my painting style, but my illustrative style. I want to think about how I, Shada, would present any subject to the world, and birds are a great place to start. So here is the supply rundown. I'm using my little Strathmore watercolor notebook. It's got a soft cover. It's a nice 5x7 size. I've used it in other videos. We'll just put a clothespin on that and keep it in place. I have my Muño watercolor set, 2 glasses of water and paper towel for blotting my brush. And then for these birds, I'm going to use smaller round brushes. I think I have a number 3 and a number 4 here, and I'll probably do most of the entire painting with those relatively small brushes. You'll also need some scrap paper. I'm just working in a little sketchbook here. You're going to want some tracing paper. And finally, we're going to grab a pencil and eraser and a fine liner or some sort of artist pen. Before I paint something that I don't usually paint, my first stop is always to try sketching it. It's not for everybody, but for me, it helps me build confidence. And so what I did, and I'm not going to go too in depth here, but I was just on Google looking at photos of birds, and I tried to capture the general shape of some of the birds that I looked at in the photos. So I would start with the shape of the body. Okay, it's like this egg shape. And then birds, would have a tail going up or a little wing. So I would try to capture that. And they have these relatively tiny heads. And how does the beak sit in relation to the eye? Usually they're sort of in line, and then 2 little legs. So really just trying to simplify and capture some of the key main features of these birds that I was looking at on Google Images. So I was just, searching robin or chickadee or whatever. Once I sketched a couple and felt like, okay, these look okay, then I would take my fine liner and go over them and kind of simplify. So like this bird at the bottom, he's got this one big wing, a little tail, a very tiny simple beak and eye, and then maybe I would just sketch a few lines to show which way his feathers are sitting, but that's about it. So by going over it with the fine liner, I'm just simplifying and trying to capture, again, those key features. Now we trace. Anytime I'm not confident with a subject like birds, I love to go through this process of refining my illustration. I sketch it, then I go over in pen, then I trace, and all those steps allow me to keep what I like about my initial illustration and change up what I do not like. So give yourself a chance to get to know the bird and think about how you, as the illustrator, would like to present birds to the world, because guess what? They don't need to look like they do in Google Images, okay? So you saw what I did there. I just went over the back of the tracing paper with pencil, and then I trace over it one last time, this time into my watercolor sketchbook, and now I have my simplified and sort of refined image all ready to go, and I can get started with painting. Just be careful if you're moving the birds around, you might get some pencil smudges, and of course that's what's nice about transferring with pencil, we can always erase. But there we go. I've got 3 cutie little birds here that I really want to kind of make into cute bird characters. And I'm ready to add some watercolor. Let's have a quick chat about mixing paints, and I'll show you what colors I'm using today. I want to keep it kind of warm. I'm starting with Van Dyke Brown, just using a clean wet brush and scrubbing at the cake of paint, bringing lots of brown over to my palette where I can kind of mix all these colors together. I'm also going to use a bit of a warmer, more reddish brown. I forget what color this is, sorry, but it is just a warmer brown. I'm using a little raw sienna and then a yellow ochre. So all of these I'm going to kind of mix together and play with once they're on the palette. All these colors are gonna look nice together and mix well, and I can change it up depending on which bird I'm painting. So you can kind of see what I'm doing there. And I will also mix a little red. I am just using a cadmium red, and I'm going to mix brown into that to darken it slightly. I may even mix a little violet in as well. Just depends. I'm still thinking that one through. We're gonna grab a bit of black just to do legs and beaks, and I'll probably use a little bit of white mixed with brown as well, but I think I'm just gonna leave it there, and we are gonna start painting. So let's begin with this bird in the bottom left. I'm using that reddish brown. I did mix a little violet in, and I am starting with the tail. And one thing I want to try and do when I'm painting my birds is to paint in the direction that the feathers are going. So I really want my brush strokes to give the look of feathers, to emulate feathers. And you really see that in the tail. This color here is sort of a mix of white with a bit of brown and French gray. And I'm leaving a little bit of negative space, kind of doing my brush strokes in the direction that the feathers would go. This doesn't look overly feathered, but I am trying to give it that feathered wing look. I'm going to fill in his head here, just using a bit of a darker paint, and then with a clean wet brush, kind of blending that darker brown out and letting it mix and bleed and transition nicely with that violet reddish brown. Do his chest very, very light and feathery. And let's keep moving on. I'm going to just fill in and sort of do a base layer on all three birds, and then we're going to wait for them to dry, and then we'll add all these fun details. Now that I've got this little guy mostly filled in, I just wanted to point out that if you get things a little too dark, you can always use a bloom. And a bloom is just adding water to an area that you've already painted, and it will naturally create this light area. So that's what I'm doing around his eye there. And that way I have kind of a highlight around the eye. When I add the black pupil, it will stand out. So don't be afraid to experiment and use all the techniques that you already know, that you've already learned on a subject that you might not be so familiar with. And speaking of an unfamiliar subject, just like I do for flowers and leaves, I am making these birds up as I go along. I am just playing and having fun. I'm not, being true to nature. As I said, I want to think about how I, as the artist, would present birds to the world. And I'm doing this very whimsical, almost character-driven idea of cute little birds. So now that the birds have started to dry, especially this one at the bottom is definitely dry, I'm able to take some darker browns or any colors, and I'm going to start layering. So this is a wet on dry technique, and I can of course be very, very precise with that now. So I'm adding the legs and the beak and the eye, but I'm also adding cute details, like spots on his chest or lines or dots on his tail. Anything goes. As I said, I want to create almost like little storybook birds would be another way to say this. I'm trying to think about what my illustrative style is. So I'm having a bit of fun, and the bottom bird, he's kind of just like a quirky, cute guy. And then, maybe a kid, maybe a baby bird. And then this guy's a little more like a cool dude bird with his spiky hair. So I'm, just giving him some spiky hair details and making his beak a little bit bigger. And the top bird, I'm actually going to make her kind of like this old mother bird, almost with a look of a kerchief. So you'll see all that come together. But really, I am just having a whole lot of fun, and I encourage you to do the same and think about how you, as the artist, would like to present birds to the world. Follow along with mine, yes, but then experiment and play on your own and see what you come up with. With my wet on dry details pretty much complete, I want to just have a bit of fun and add some leaves to my little sketchbook bird practice here, partly because I think green would just look nice with all the warm colors I've used, and partly because I'm kind of waiting for that first layer of details to dry so that I can add a few more details if I would like to. So if you have been practicing flowers and leaves with me for months, weeks, or years, this you might find to be comforting. I certainly did. So if you think this would look pretty, go ahead and add some leaves, and we will simply wait for those birds to dry. Then once they have dried, I just thought there was still, more details that I could add. I did some sort of gentle outlining of some of the birds. I added more little lines and dots and tiny, breast feathers, and just kind of layered the details to give them a really nice finished, polished look and to help bring out their cute little personalities. So I've got baby bird, like a cool older brother bird, and then this is mama bird here with her beautiful red scarf over her head. And I am using like a dark brown to kind of bring out some of the wing and feather and tail details, and I think you can really see that here. And that's about it for the details on my cute little birds. These are all done. Thank you so much for a great request. This year I'm trying to push myself, practice new things, and work on my illustrative and artistic style, and I hope you'll join me. Was I 100% happy with these? No, I wasn't, but I'm going to paint birds again, and I'm going to keep learning. Thank you, patrons, for being here, and thank you so much for your support. I'll see you soon with a new tutorial.